It's not just a horror show in the ayahuasca ceremony. A lot of people are having highly prized spiritual experiences. So just a couple, they just have a couple studies they sent, the LSD for alcoholism, they're showing some good research. They're showing the psilocybin study they did with Griffiths produced profound existential experiences in healthy volunteers that led to lasting beneficial impact. Then also for the advanced stage cancer, significantly reduced anxiety and depression scores. In another study, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, was significantly reduced with psilocybin. So just to finish up, it's this idea of, this is a whole other book, this guy Modell talks about imagination and the meaningful brain. So it's a kind of an intense book, but I thought it was very interesting. And he's talking about this limbic system and what happens to us in our minds. And he's, what I relate to what he said to what they're talking about ego dominance and things like that, is you freeze your metaphors. You freeze your art, your creativity, because that's where the reimagination, that's the recontextualization, that's where the new possibilities come from. And if that system is stuck, there's wrenches in the gears, then you're unable to do that. So he talks about metaphors as just being like, it's one of the main functions of our brain is to relate different domains. He calls that a metaphor. So relating the domain of my thoughts to my feelings, for example, that's one of the functions of the brain. He says that's a metaphor. And if that's broken, if that's not working right, there's other metaphors of like relating the smell to this thought. All these ideas you can imagine, that's what our brain's doing, is connecting different domains. And if that's broken down, and it's that metaphorical system that creates, just like art, just like this poetry and things like that, this new story, this new understanding. And so he says that, this metaphorical system mostly operates subconsciously. And he uses these examples in his book of all these famous mathematicians and physicists that, like, when they wanted to solve some problem, the key is they think about, okay, I'm going to solve that problem. And then next step, stop thinking about it and let it percolate. Get the mind out of the way, let the subconscious, metaphorical, perhaps it's limbic, let that system work on it, and then spontaneously it will start, and that's what they talk about with this entropic brain function. You get into these other stages of possibilities where like avalanches of networks start happening. Things start coming together in ways that your mind can't keep up with, but that we're actually designed to do those things. So, like I said, trauma ego, that's what we call it down at the center sometimes. This idea that you'd have ego in response to trauma, trying to protect you, trying to reduce uncertainty, reduce surprise. So you freeze up, your metaphorical system. And then one area that he talks about how the metaphors get frozen is like now the past relating to the present, that metaphor frozen. So now when you experience the past, this guy walks up to the airport, and he's talking to the guy, and he's in a uniform, and he's at the counter, and he's telling him this strong thing. All of a sudden, he's back in the concentration camp, because he's triggered, and he can't differentiate. He's locked, it's frozen, it's stuck, and so his metaphor system is broken. So ego dissolution, allows for these things to just flow freely again, without your prediction, without your anticipation. Sometimes it's very difficult. And that's one other aspect, so I'm saying this has to be guided, ideally integrated. And then I was just in a sweat lodge. I got invited to sweat lodge the other day, and they were talking about, the tradition. How do you go to this heart space? How do you come into a heart space and let yourself be guided by a heart space where this stuff can happen freely and you can let your mind go? Which is really like, that's what the Icaro is. When you drink a lot of ayahuasca and you're singing to somebody, and then all of a sudden, boom, your mind is gone. But I'm still singing to them, we call, people call it channeling, plant spirits, whatever you want to call it. It's just your heart opening and flowing, and you don't need your mind to do things like that, and everybody has been there. And in sports, they say, oh, wow, he was unconscious. Look what he did, this magical thing that he did, so it's part of our everyday life, actually, this kind of thing. So guided and integrated. And then the other part that the leader of the sweat lodge wanted to make very clear to people, and this is part of why people don't want to get out of their egos and why they're so comfortable, and we've been creating a more and more comfortable ego structure in our culture, in our society, is that number one, it's hard work. It's very, very hard work. And number two, that involves a lot of sacrifice. So those are two of the main reasons I would say this is not for you, is if you don't want to do that. The people that come to our center, it's like, guess what? Yeah, it's hard work and it involves a lot of sacrifice, but that's maybe what you need to get through. And in fact, he would say there's no other way. It doesn't have to be ayahuasca. Do it any other way. But the reality is you have to put in the hard work and you have to sacrifice to overcome those things. And if you're going to go into some